Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Let's kick things off. So thank you very much for joining this month's webinar. My name is Nick Smyth, and I will be looking after Qubit, and I'll be looking after doing the webinar this afternoon. Today we're going to talk about how you can drive conversions in the context of personalization. We're going to share insights and examples of what we call real-time retailing, and discuss why we believe this approach to conversion rate optimization is so powerful. As you may have gathered from an email that sent out earlier, I'm afraid Chris Lacey from Supergroup had a last-minute work engagement, which meant that he was unable to join us today. In his place, though, I'm very pleased to be joined by one of our leading research engineers who is going to be sharing some tips and insights into the psychology of persuasion and how this can be applied to personalization. So I believe we've got just under 40 people on the call today, and some companies that may be new to Qubit. I hope today's sessions will give you a clearer picture of where web personalization is headed, and hopefully through some actual client examples we're going to share, we'll also trigger some ideas as to how you can apply this to your own business. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the GoToMeeting webinar chat feature, and we'll come to those at the end of the webinar. So I wanted to kick things off this afternoon with some research we conducted last month to help our clients understand the changing landscape of personalization and perhaps the opportunities that have opened up with some of the latest technological innovations. I think it's probably fair to say that online marketers know more than most how consumer behavior has changed over time. And there's been many studies that have looked to sort of deconstruct this sort of huge behavioural shift that we've seen. I'm not going to look at that now, but I just did want to reflect on one key aspect of this Facebook, Google, Apple generation, and that is the very transient nature of today's consumer. In their own way, Google, Facebook, and Apple have undoubtedly contributed to a huge shift in how we behave as individuals. I think in the context of conversions for retailers, this is most often felt in the levels of expectations that are set by consumers based on their day-to-day web experiences. I think if we also believe as a macro trend that as the web becomes more personal, it stands to reason that the expectations of consumers will undoubtedly increase if we believe that is personal equals better. So one of the many studies to come out of our research team this year uncovered an interesting statistic, which I think brings this to life a little bit. Due to the persistent nature of a basket on many websites and for many retailers, we wanted to understand how many people actually added things to their basket and left on any page, rather than the more traditional studies that have looked at people exiting from a very specific page, i.e. the basket page. And for people that have abandoned a basket, that figure is at 40%. For us, though, when we extracted this data, we actually looked at 90 of our customer websites in the UK, and we looked at desktop, mobile, and tablet, and we saw that this figure was in the region of 70 to 80% of people who actually abandoned a basket at some point in their journey or in their lifetime. And this reinforced just how big the opportunity is to convert visitors who have clearly contemplated buying a project, but for whatever reason have failed to convert. Perhaps more alarming is when you start to look at lifetime visitor conversion rate, which is how we urge our customers to view conversions. We then start to see figures in the range of 95 to 98% of people who never convert. When we start to consider perhaps PPC, SEO investment, and other traffic acquisition costs, it's not surprising that marketers are increasingly interested in conversion rate optimization to improve returns in an ever-increasingly competitive space. Another retail stat which we extracted, this time from 28 of our clients, uncovered that 30% of revenue was made up from a cohort of visitors who had more than 3 purchases in their lifetime. Had more than 3 purchases in a time frame that we were looking at, which actually was 2 months. This high-value group made up only 0.03% of visitors. And for us, we felt that this validated the importance of gaining a greater understanding of what is happening at the visitor and segment level. And I think in the context of personalization, this also raises questions about how we can use data like this to target visitors based on perceived value, whether it's from aggregated online purchases or whether it's non-purchasers who are just behaving in a way that we could perceive as valuable. So in this next section, I just wanted to look at 3 key themes that surface from research we commissioned over the summer with Forrester. We ran a survey to understand the general consensus of 150 retail marketing decision makers and to look at what they felt were the barriers to adopting personalization or adopting practices to improve online customer experiences. The first point that really I wanted to focus on was really reinforce what we've already mentioned. That is, that marketers are increasingly turning their attention on themselves and looking to drive value through conversion rate optimization. I think in a world where traffic acquisition costs have increased and practices like SEO are becoming more and more difficult, this seems certainly as a logical place to focus attention for ongoing growth. The second point we learned from this study was just how much decision makers believe that in the context of tech that controls the on-site experience, the power seems to be shifting from IT to marketing, or at least a responsibility. It's also clear, though, that from this study that that decision makers don't feel that currently that they have the right tech in place to deliver on the personalization strategy that they want, that they're looking for. And this was mostly seen in responses to the question of tech redundancy, where 72% of respondents agreed that this was an issue for their organization, along with overlap, together with a lack of in-house skills, which we're going to discuss towards the end of the presentation. So that's perhaps a quick snapshot of what type of consumer we're dealing with, what most businesses are grappling with as they position themselves for this next wave of change. So let's focus on what exactly this change is. Conversions and conversion rate improvement for a lot of businesses used to be about site-wide A/B MVT testing. This was site-wide conversion rate optimization. This used to be about finding low-hanging fruit that you could test and hopefully, if you had a winning test, implement that and hard-code that change for the benefit of all of your customers. So this is really about improving experiences for everyone. But for a lot of businesses, and we've seen this as well for our customers, for a lot of businesses, there is a diminishing return to this type of approach. There becomes less and less opportunities to fix site-wide opportunities, and that's really where we start to turn our attention towards the visitor and the sort of the segment and a more granular, sort of personalized approach. I think the other sort of development in the personalization space is what we could largely sort of call the algorithmic approach, which of course Amazon pioneered and has now been adopted fairly widely in the retail sector. But I think where we are today and where we're seeing this sort of shift arrive to is now what businesses are really looking forward is to understand how they can utilize personalization and conversion and utilize, if you like, hero real estate to optimize a visitor based on where they are in their customer life cycle. And we've seen some great examples of this across the web. So how does this translate to today, and what do we believe this future will look like? I think the first point here is Amazon is predicted to account for 26% of all online sales by 2016, and is second, I think, only to Walmart now in terms of market cap. And of course, Amazon is particularly strong in certain categories, and not all, luckily. And the shopping experience we have on a site like Amazon is very different to perhaps the shopping experience that you would have on sort of like a Net-a-Porter or an ASOS. So we actually have we've been thinking about this a lot at Qubit, and we actually see this experiential divide split into 3 distinct areas. The utility web is predominantly about speed and convenience. And this, of course, is a key feature of Amazon. The utility web is perhaps less famous for delivering really immersive, engaging experiences, which of course is what we recognize as the key differentiator for the experience web. The experience web is the world in which consumer attention, if you like, is a currency, and the challenge is to fight for this attention by being able to deliver the right content to the right visitor at the right time. Easy to say, but for many this is difficult in practice to do. And I think lastly, of course, we need to recognize that the mobile app-based web, which undoubtedly lends itself to the experience web, but also has proven to deliver tools and services which are very utility-based in their application, perhaps like mobile online banking and the like. So what is real-time retailing, and why do we think that it's such a game changer for conversion optimization? So there were two key principles that we wanted to address when developing our solution. The first was to address the challenge of speed and frequency to which an e-commerce business could build a data-driven solution or activation and gather results fast in order to work out whether this was driving incremental revenue or whether to simply move on. And as little as 4 or 5 years ago, for many businesses, the idea of being able to dynamically change a website in real time based on a visitor's behavior and perhaps as well purchase history was still very much in the realm of blue sky thinking. The second challenge, and to expand on this idea of visitor history, was for Qubit to really understand the visitor beyond the limitations of what is possible of being stored in the browser, or more specifically, the cookie. Today, this technology enables us to look up values that exist against a visitor ID, so that we can start to understand things like online lifetime value, the date at which someone has purchased last, the first purchase date, products that they've purchased, etc. And this is all information that we are able to look up against a visitor ID to deliver that right content at the right time to the right person. So for some businesses on the call today, perhaps you may already be aware of this technology or this type of approach through some type of logged-in event. For our customers using our platform, we don't require a visitor to be logged into a content management system to be able to do this. We're using technology that allows us to do this to 100% of visitors. So let's now turn our attention to what website personalization really is for the experience web. As previously mentioned, personalization is not just about algorithmic recommendations. It's about understanding what a visitor needs to see on a specific visit based on where they are in their customer lifecycle. It's very much about right content, right visit, right time. So it's about using this data to deliver solutions designed to attract, engage, convert, and retain. So I just want to show 4 examples aligned to this for clients that we're working with. The first one comes from something we're doing with Arcadia Group. It's been one of our long-standing clients. And really what we're doing here is tailoring stock selections to different people based on their locations. And I guess the clever aspect of what we're doing here is we're able to look up weather, perhaps quite timely now, although British weather is, well, somewhat predictable. We're able to look up either weather during that specific day or up to 14 days in advance to then take over a specific part of the page, which is in the bottom right-hand side here, to say, to basically create that tailored selection based on how the weather is in that location. So this is obviously not right for all businesses, but certainly within the retail space, this is something where it's gaining quite a lot of traction. Another example, perhaps, this time around sort of content engagement, and we do a lot of this where it's about understanding what content drives up conversion for visitors at a particular part in their life cycle. So this example for Farfetch, where we can actually disclose the conversion rate increase, we drove a 17% increase in conversions. What we were doing here is ultimately showing a message layer to visitors who were on their 10th page view, and they were new visitors, to direct them to Farfetch's FAQs. Now, we saw that visitors who had found that FAQ page, naturally that they had a higher conversion rate. So this was about guiding people to the right part of the site at the right time in their journey. Another example, perhaps, this is something that we've been doing with LK Bennett and a number of clients, is a slightly different approach to abandonment catching. Now, we've already seen that visitors, 70 to 80% of visitors will abandon a basket in their lifetime. What we've been able to do here is identify on Alkade Bennett a particular segment of visitors who we wanted to deploy or display a message to on exit. So Qubit has technology that can ultimately understand an exit from a page. We use mouse interaction to understand an exit. We also look at things like the velocity of which that mouse is exiting the page, as well as the direction. And with that information, we can then predict an exit very accurately. This is the same technology that powers our exit feedback tool. So we drove an 11% uplift in conversions for Alkade Bennett's basket abandonments, but it was for UK visitors who had not purchased online within 9 months, but had visited the site more than 3 times. And lastly, this is perhaps often viewed as a slightly longer way round to conversion improvement. We see pretty much across the board that visitors who come via email have a high conversion rate. This is quite common and also makes a lot of sense. They tend to be marketed to in a way that is more engaging. They have a more consistent conversation with a brand. So getting people to sign up to your email is really important. So again, this is kindly an example that Alkade Bennett allowed us to share. We had a 38% increase in mailing signups. We basically activated a light box on the site. It's a good example of something we can build very, very quickly in about sort of a couple of hours on our platform of design work and the like. And we targeted new users who've been on the homepage for 7 seconds, as well as existing users that had more than 2 sessions. And we did this in the US and the UK. So those were just some examples of things that we've been doing online around targeting very specific behaviours and customers and visitors. I now just want to hand over to Will Browne, who I mentioned is one of our data scientists, and who's been looking, and we've been looking very much at the principles of persuasion. What is it that makes us purchase? And for any of you that have read the book by Robert Cialdini, who's a psychologist, or actually Dr. Robert Cialdini, it's a very interesting book about what drives us to do certain things. So I hand over to Will, who's going to talk you through a few of these principles.
Hi there. As Nick said, today I'm going to focus on 6 techniques that we've been researching here at Qubit and a bit of background to the science behind them. So first, this is Dr. Robert Cialdini. He says, influence involves change, the ability to move people in a desired direction. And as Nick said, he wrote a really interesting book about this that condensed 30 years of research into 6 key principles. To give you a little bit of background about Dr. Robert Cialdini, he's been a client. He's had clients such as Google, Microsoft, and IBM, and he was actually involved in Barack Obama's kind of dream team of behavioural scientists in his successful 2012 election. So he's got a lot behind him, and he's sold over 2 million of these books. So these 6 principles that I'm going to talk through, they can be used online. I'm going to give examples of them. Are reciprocity, scarcity, authority, commitment, liking, and social proof. So we're going to start with reciprocity. This is the idea, basically, that people you give things to are more likely to give you something back. And the example that was been used before is to do with waiting. And why do they give you these mints? And it is because they're manipulative people. So there's an interesting study where they gave a mint with a bill. I'm sure you've all received this. And they found that a single mint increased the percentage tip by 3%. Now, they gave 2 mints. And it wasn't 6%, it was 14%. And then they tried something which was very much focused on this idea of reciprocity, giving something unexpected, where a waiter put down 1 mint, left, and then came back and said, oh, but for you, you can have a second mint. And they found that this behaviour actually increased tips by 23%. So it's not so much what you're giving, it is how you're giving it, and the understanding that what you're doing is generous and a little bit unexpected and a little bit special for you. So to give you an example of how that works online, we can see what Link's doing, who are one of the retail clients that we actually work with. So here they're offering a free parfait diamond earring when you spend over £200. So this is a great example where someone's offering something very generous. It looks fantastic, and you feel in a sense, obligated to come back to them and treat these people as someone who's given you something, and so you will give something back. The next principle we want to talk about is something we've done quite a lot of work on here at Qubit, which is the idea of scarcity. Now, simply put, we like things that are hard to come by. I mean, we've all collected football stickers or perhaps interested in a certain vintage, but we very easily confuse scarcity with value. A classic tale comes from Coca-Cola. In April 1985, they decided, well, we're going to try this new flavour of Coke, call it New Coke, released it, and stopped making the old Coke flavour. This caused a massive backlash in the southern American states. There was people hoarding Coca-Cola. There was a lobbying group set up to sue them. It all got very messy. So what Coke did, they kind of caved to this perceived pressure and released old Coke. And this had a dramatic effect on sales. As people saw that old Coke was now a scarce resource, by the end of the year, their sales had picked up at over twice the rate of Pepsi's, their arch rival. Now, some people have thought this was kind of a very clever marketing ploy rather than something that genuinely went wrong, but either way, it shows how important just the perception of scarcity can be for the value. Now, if we go to online, how can we use the same principle? How can we use this decision-making process? House of Fraser have a good example. Now, this is very simple. If you just show the amount of stock left or that something is low on stock, you immediately create the perception of a scarce resource. And we've seen over a number of tests that this has a really good impact and has a consistent impact over time. So this is just something that I think everybody who has the ability to show stock, and to do this you have to have a good data layer in place, should be putting something along these lines into their site. Authority. Now, this is a really interesting one. There was a fantastic study done in 1961 about how people react to figures of authority. It's very famous, I'm sure a few have heard of it. Basically, what happened was a human being comes into a room, sees a scientist wearing a lab coat and a clipboard, perceives another person who he thinks is another volunteer or another subject to the experiment. He's told from the scientist that he has to sit down and teach this other person to learn phrases of words. Every time the other person gets a phrase wrong, they get electrocuted. And with increasing frequency and increasing intensity as they get more and more of these phrases wrong. What the subject isn't aware of is that the person opposite them is actually an actor, and they're not actually getting electrocuted, but they are very good at acting. Now, under the guidance of the figure of authority, i.e. a man in a lab coat, the subjects were actually persuaded to administer a 450-volt shock to the, it sounds awful, to the person opposite them, despite them screaming in agony. Now, the really difficult thing here is 65% of people did this. So it just goes to show that if you believe someone to be in a better position to understand what the situation is, you're much more likely to do things, even if, in your own opinion, they're awful. So to put it in a slightly less sadistic way, here is an example from Mr. Porter, used to Mr. David Gandy, who is a beautiful man selling beautiful things. And what we're hoping for here is that even though you may not like this jacket, and objectively you might find it something you'd never think of wearing, given his recommendation and giving his authority over the situation, you're now much more likely to think, I could look a little bit like them if I wear this jacket. This is a good thing. Okay, let's go spend loads of money on this jacket. And that's the idea. It's really that simple. Commitment. This is based on the idea that when we say something, we like to be consistent with ourselves. So it's an idea of kind of self-consistency. If you say you're going to do something, you're much more likely to do it. If you write something down and it's publicly available, you're much more likely to go through with what you wrote down. So what's been used before for this is people were asked in one neighbourhood to put up a sign saying, we support this driving regime. So you're not allowed to drive through the neighbourhood, we're against it. Now, no one wanted to put up a massive sign saying, we don't want people driving through our neighbourhood. Now, in a very similar situation, a different neighbourhood, about twice as many people wanted to put this sign up. And the only difference was that 2 weeks prior to this request, they asked people if they could put a very small postcard within their window saying exactly the same thing. The difference being that if they'd already made a commitment that, yes, they are against people driving through this neighbourhood, they were much more likely to then say, hey, okay, of course I'm with this. I've said I'm already with this. Of course I'll put up a rather large placard telling people to do so. Now, it's very difficult to ask people to put up placards online, but what you can do is make people commit to the idea of wanting something. And this is where we're using Farfetch here as an example. This is where the Wishlist comes in. So getting people to put forward a small commitment, either adding to a wish list or ticking that they like something. These are all things that add to the perception that they themselves have an opinion and it's publicly available. So here we want to use Wishlist and get people to promote Wishlist as a stepping stone towards a conversion event. Likability. This one's quite interesting and quite tough to do online. We do like people. We like dealing with people on online, offline. But buying online can be a distinctly unhuman, fairly automated process. There isn't that frenzy salesperson in front of you. Now, online, the only way you can do this is either by having an example that we're going to show you now, which is having a great big meerkat there, which has worked wonders. I mean, they're selling car insurance. It's terribly dull, but by associating themselves with a very likeable character, they've seen a dramatic rise in sales. And this guy has now got 55,000 Twitter followers, and more than 800,000 people have liked him on Facebook. And I think it's probably unfair to say this is the sole reason, but their value has kind of propelled from 43 million in 2008 to 88 million in 2012. In no small part, I think, to a rather attractive meerkat. Now, within what we can do, is, as well as having cute, cuddly toys, the About Us page is probably the best example of where you can really start selling yourself as a human being. This is where you get across the idea that the company isn't just a faceless organisation, isn't just a whole load of cookies and tracking devices and JavaScript. This is actually people really wanting to selling products, believing in products, and giving off that sense that these are human beings talking to human beings rather than computers talking to computers. Lastly, I wanted to look at social proof. So the idea that if people are seeing other people doing something, they're more likely to do it themselves. And the interesting example here comes from hotels. Now, a sign, I'm sure you've all seen them, a sign in a hotel that says, "Can you people please reuse your towels to save the environment?" That gets about 35% of people to reuse their towels. Now, someone thought, well, I think we can do better than this. So they went a bit further. They said a sign that said 75% of people reuse their towels. Now, this meant that people, instead of 35% of people reusing towels, they saw 44% of people reusing towels. And they thought, well, that's pretty good. It seems that if other people think that the majority of people are reusing towels, they reuse towels too. But they thought, well, maybe we can go one better than this. And they put down on the sign, it's a very small change, they said that 75% of people staying in this room have reused this towel. Now, this had a really interesting effect, and this actually increased it by 33%. So from 35%, it increased by another 33%. And this is a point which is saying that when you try and associate people with people like them, they're much more likely to do the action that you wish, and they're much more easily to persuade. Online, this is really interesting. There's some really good examples where you have best buys. So the best-selling products of a week have stickers on them which say, "These are the most popular products." And it's the idea of this kind of social voting online, which is actually quite easy to do, and allows other people to get a perception of what other people think. So as you can go onto the site, see that these are their best buy, this is socially valuable, and these sites and these items tend to have a conversion rate of up to double that of other products. So I really hope you found those 6 principles interesting. If you want to find anything else about it, please contact Nick and we can talk a little bit more and ask questions at the end. And I'll be happy to answer any more questions. I'm just going to pass back over to Nick now.
Thank you very much, Will. So those are just, I guess, there's just a little bit of insight into some of the things that we think about at Qubit, and some of the things that we want to be able to build into activations that we're delivering for our customers. So I think we had some quite high-level examples there. We're starting to look at how we can tactically employ some of these natural behaviours and ways that we react to things into actual online activations. So I just want to start to move towards some sort of closing thoughts and start to sort of wrap up. But before I do, I just wanted to have a look at what do we think it is that you need to have in place to become a real-time retailer. I guess the first thing is having the right team. I think for some time now, and it was actually Hal Varian, who's Google's chief of data, I believe, is his chief data scientist, said that it's the statistician, the data analysts that are going to have the sort of sexiest jobs in the future. Perhaps 5-6 years ago we would have thought he was crazy, but certainly I think this is true. At Qubit we have quite a large team of data scientists, data analysts who are able to interpret data and understand how we can then build solutions to then activate on a site. And it's about that data analyst working with a creative marketer to bring that hypothesis to life. We have a team of 6 or 7 JavaScript engineers who, with our clients who run a managed service, build these solutions, these personalization activations using JavaScript. And then ultimately, it's about working with our clients to make sure that we're getting the right products in front, or the right information in front of the right business at the right time. Going back to the data concept, we do a lot of work with our customers around structuring data. Now, some of you may be aware that we have a tag management product. Qubit fundamentally realized that very early on in our product roadmap, we realized that tag management was not just a great way of deploying JavaScript onto the page, but also a great way of reading and gathering large amounts of data. So we've been working with 20 companies, including Google, Criteo, BrightTag, and the like, to work on a W3C approved data model. So we use a universal variable model, which captures an unlimited number of variables that look to understand a user when they're logged in, look to understand the products that they're reading on a page, but essentially is a data representation of the website or a web page. We combine this quantitative data with feedback, and as I mentioned earlier on, we have a feedback tool that allows us to understand and predict an exit. And at that point, we ask a very simple question, which is typically around "help us improve." And we often get between a 3 and 5% response rate to that. Now, our technology can understand a sentiment for those responses, so whether it's positive or negative. We understand the page it was left on. We understand who the visitor was based on whether they're new, returning, purchaser, non-purchaser, etc. So we can start to build up a very interesting picture of who these visitors are, and more importantly, why they haven't purchased. With this information, we're then starting to build these hypotheses, and we've seen that tests that start with a data-driven hypothesis have a much higher chance of winning. And this is something that we've baked into our products. So we have the ability to then uncover insights around specific visitor dimensions. So whether it's the country or city or area within metro area within a particular geography that they're coming from, or whether it's a type of page type they're looking at, we can start to join these data sets together. For some of our most advanced clients, we're now starting to look at providing them with an API, a real-time data clickstream API, which they can then plug into their own BI system so that they can do modeling, but with offline data and other data sources as well. But this is really the future. It's about using huge amounts of granular data that's not sampled to uncover opportunities that exist in your site. And with that, we are then ultimately looking to build solutions, which I'll come to shortly. But I guess just to quickly, a couple of the types of things that we're able to look at. For example, we can. This was research that we did this year that actually said the average US customer coming to a UK website is worth 3 times as much as a UK customer to your business, and this is particularly the case within fashion, as we've seen. And another key insight that came out of this research was visitors arriving at lunchtime are 33% more likely to purchase than at other times of the day. So again, this raised really fascinating questions about what could you do within a quite short space of time to perhaps change or try to react to this different type of purchaser, this more engaged perhaps purchaser with a high propensity to transact. So really what we want to start to understand is who are your segments? Do you have sofa surfers, as we call them? These are quick browsers who dwell on certain pages. Do you have, as we've seen, big spenders who make up a large percentage of your revenue, but ultimately a small cohort? Do you have what we call basket cases? They arrive, they're continually exiting the site without purchasing, but they leave stuff in their basket, or super shoppers, and these know what they want and perhaps make up 10% of your revenue. And these are just sort of anecdotal segments that we find all the time for our customers. But ultimately, once we've found these customers, it's about building browser-side solutions on our clients' websites very quickly to react to that. And this is just a snapshot of our deliver platform, which allows us to build either on-page or in-page activations to very specific segments. So we can build the solution either in, if you like, marketing mode, which wouldn't require any code at all, where you can just select and use WYSIWYG functionality, or for developers within the business, they can use advanced mode and write that actual JavaScript into the page. And then more importantly, it's then about selecting the rules, who you want to target. And as I mentioned right at the beginning of the presentation, we don't just look at in-session behaviors, we actually want to understand more about the visitor, so we are able to look up historic information as well. And that's really about sort of customer experience management at that point. So finally, as I said, once we've activated it, we've found the right solution to deploy to the right visitor. It's then about testing it, and this is probably where we'll close. For us, A/B testing should be part of a process. It shouldn't necessarily be the means to the end. We used A/B testing for our client to uncover whether there is something that we could be delivering to a very specific customer segment that could be driving incrementality. Now, through our platform, we have the ability to switch tests from 50-50 mode, split traffic mode for let's say a segment of 5% of total traffic. If we identify that has driven a statistically significant uplift, we're then able to switch that to all traffic. And that's really how we go through a very systematic approach of improving conversion over time, of finding different segments, different behaviors where we can find a very specific solution in order to increase conversion. So I hope that's been useful. I think we've come in a little bit under time, perhaps because Chris wasn't able to join us today, Chris from SuperDry. But I hope you found that session useful. At this point, if you'd like to fire through any questions that you may have, please do so. If not, and you would perhaps like to arrange a follow-up meeting or perhaps a demonstration of the platform, which we briefly touched on towards the end of that, then feel free to email me at nick@qubitproducts.com. So I'll just hold on for a few seconds to see if we have any questions. Okay, it seems we only have one question. The question is, how many tests do we typically run in a given month? Largely depends in that case on whether this is something you're managing as a self-service customer or as a managed service customer. For our managed service clients, that depends on the number of days you'd like us to support you. But let's say on average we support roughly about 3 days per month. We're activating anything in the region of 4 to 5 activations, depending on the level of sophistication of those tests. So for easy things to build, like email lightboxes, or the basket abandonment type thing, that takes roughly a few hours to deliver. For more advanced things where we're looking to perhaps use cross-sell visitors based on previous behavior, then that can take as much as a day. But in any given month, roughly around five activations, and we'd be looking to as a success rate of around about 50%. So half of those will be switched to all traffic because they'll be generating incremental revenue. So one question here, Vikesh, could you elaborate on what you mean by right browser side JavaScript solution? So what I meant by browser side rather than server side, we're using the browser ultimately to be able to deploy the JavaScript that we would have built. And that JavaScript really, it could be in the context of making a change in the page. It could be introducing an additional layer in the page, as opposed to something that would be happening server side, which would be probably handled by your content management system, for example. So I hope that clears that up. One more question. Does the platform have functionality for multivariate testing, and is there for self-optimization? So I'll answer the first question. Do we do multivariate testing? We're able to set up a number of variations which we split test. For many clients, when you're starting to look at very granular segments, which we do through our platform, what we're looking to do, by the very nature of the fact that we found potentially a small segment, often the pool of visitors you have is less great. So actually the most appropriate thing to do at that stage in order to get results is to split test rather than MVT test. MVT testing is fantastic if you've got a huge number of visitors, lots of traffic. You're then able to get results relatively quickly. Obviously, the more variance you introduce into a test, that reduces the power and the ability to reach significance quickly. So really, the goal of the platform, and sort of what we believe, is to drive conversions fast. You want to get answers quickly, and the most appropriate thing to do there is to split test or A/B test to do that. And I think the second part of your question was, is there for self-optimization? If that's sort of automated optimization, yes. So once we've identified a winning test, and let's say the scenario is we've identified a very specific type of behaviour, which is people who have previously purchased and their value is, let's say, that their previous aggregate value is over £300. We want to deploy a specific message to these visitors. Everyone from that point onwards will fall into that group, into that activation going forward. So if you like, that it continually optimizes for that behaviour. Another question from Gonzalo. How do you calibrate the rules to trigger events, e.g. 10 clicks before displaying FAQ? So what we're looking to do here, some of this information we're storing in our first-party cookie. So the two, we're actually deploying two main pieces of technology. One is, as I mentioned, the feedback. The other is our first-party cookie. That first-party cookie is reading anywhere between 100 to 250 plus variables that are contained within the data layer that we implement on a site. So this data layer is what we call universal variable. So, for example, we can understand the page that they're on, but then there are some things that we can compute on our side, which are basically how many pages that they viewed, and at that point we then understand what to show. And yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks very much for your questions. As I mentioned, if you would like to arrange a demo, I'd be happy to organise that with you. Just email me at Nick@Qubit Products. And likewise, if you want to see any specific use cases or scenarios that perhaps that you come up with on this call of how you could apply it to your business, do feel free to send those through to you, and we can get those mocked up and prepared in a specific demo, which is often a much better way of going about things. So thanks very much for your time, everyone, and I hope you really enjoyed that. Have a great Christmas and New Year. I think it's almost time to be saying that. Thanks very much. Bye.